Welcome to ABraz Around the House. Today I'm going to be going over the garage attic lift system that I put in right above me. This garage attic lift system has been planned from day one whenever I was doing this garage makeover, if you've been following along with my makeover series. The attic above me has a good amount of space and I wanted to utilize all of that. And if you watch the video link that I provide above, you can get an idea of what that space looks like and how it was planned as far as using this attic lift for it. This attic lift is a little bit unique in that it doubles as a table in the garage or a bar area, and you'll get more details on that as I get into the video. But thank you again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like and comment. If you have any comments, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. I will be putting the parts that it takes to do this build in the description below, as detailed as possible, but if I don't quite get everything there, feel free to ask and I'll be happy to respond and give you more detail on that. So enjoy. All right, first we got our Harbor Freight Pittsburgh Automotive 440-pound electric hoist with the remote control, which you see there. And I basically just take off the housing first, remove a few bolts there, and then this is the actual motor stop here that I'm removing right now. And you want to just basically just strip this thing down. Before I started, I had a friend weld a 5/8 impact socket to a garage door shaft for me. That's what I'm testing here now. That nub on the end though, round nub, had to be cut off, so I cut that off so I could get straight to that 5/8 shaft and fit perfectly after that. There we go. Next, I needed to take that bushing off the end, so that came out pretty easy. Is that a bearing or no? Just a bushing? Oh, it's a steel.
I think it's.
Then hacksaw off the end and grind it down just a little bit to allow that 5/8 inch socket to fit through there. Then just tighten everything back up, put that housing back on, and then do a quick test on the shaft with it attached to that. Alright, building the lift platform. This wood I'm bringing in is not only for the lift platform, but it's also for the bracing that goes up in the attic as well. I did use on the plywood, I used a birch plywood that I had pre-cut the widths for the most part for it at Home Depot. These are dolly handles that I'm putting on there, and I'll put in the description, I'll put a link to where I found those on Amazon. I was real excited about that find because it fit perfectly with two pieces of that plywood together, fit perfectly for that. So what I'm doing here is I'm pre-drilling the holes that hold these handles on the birch plywood, and wanted to have those holes already drilled before I start working on the spring section. 3/8 inch bolts, lock washers. Length is 2.5 inches on the bolts. So now I'm just testing to make sure that these bolts fit all the way through, and then I just take them back off and you'll notice the holes are there. So what I'm doing now is I'm drilling out the pilot holes that will flip this over, and it will fill in the bolts that protrude out. It'll cover those up. This is the top piece, the bottom of the top piece here. So I go ahead and drill all 6 of those pilot holes where all those 6 springs are. So that's that top board, and it just flips over. And the next thing I need to do is go ahead and work on these eyelets. And on these eyelets, what I have to do is bend them out just a little bit so that I can get the springs on them. And then they'll just go in, and I'll just bolt those in like I'm doing here. And then cut the end off. And so all I have is just a little bit of that bolt and washer, or that nut and washer, and those are the springs that will hold the bottom of the platform. And so I put all 6 of those on, and the idea as far as putting these springs on is so that I don't have a hard stop, and that won't affect my motor. And so I cut those ends off just like I did on the first 2. And then I'll clean up and take this piece off. There's the 6 springs. Put my top piece back down here, and you see those sticking up, and I just lay that right over the top where I had drilled those pilots. Now I've already got those holes drilled for the handles, and now it's just a matter of bolting everything in place. These handles are very solid, very well made, pretty heavy too. That's one thing as I put this together that didn't quite account for the weight of this total. And then at the top of the handles, that's where I put another eyelet. Of course, this is quite a large one. And just bolt that on, and that'll be what the wires connect to. They go up to the hoist. Sand off those burrs. And next here we have the creation of the laminate beam. I use a couple 2x6s and a couple pieces of that birch plywood, liquid nail it together. Use some screws to serve as my clamps, and this beam is pretty solid and pretty heavy. Here I'm just putting on a little bit of that hardware, but these also will help hold the beam together. That's why I bolted them all the way through. Not that the liquid nail wouldn't do the job, but and the screws. Alright, so we trim those off, and now we're ready to complete the rest of this hardware on the beam itself. Here I'm getting ready to put the motor on, and this electric hoist motor had to add an extra spacer board so that it would be centered as far as that garage door shaft going through. And because the bolts that I had, they were a fine metric that goes into that housing. I was only able to find them, I think, 4.5 inches long, so I had to drill some pilot holes here and make sure that I could get those bolts attached to that motor. Okay, now that that's complete, I can put that through and test it, make sure it's centered. I had to do a little bit of fine adjustments there, and then cut off the end. Alright, we're going to go over this little piece here that I'll be carrying up to the attic. This is this section of the attic lift system. It involves the beam and the motor and the garage door parts that are going to take the lift up and down. And I went to my local overhead garage door business here in town and purchased the torsion spring shaft, the bearing plates, and the cable drums. I think I spent about $100 on these parts. These are commercial parts, so I have a little bit bigger drum with the commercial parts. It'll take up to 16 feet of cable, and I do have two 16-foot cables as well that they gave me. And these bearing plates, I had to drill a couple of holes for those so that I could, instead of putting the holes so close out to the end, I thought that was just a little too close to the edge for my liking, so I moved those in a little bit. And then I have these drums just snug down right now. They basically tell you that when you go to tighten them with these bolts here on the cable drum, to tighten them until you snug it up, and then do one full turn, a half to a full turn, to lock it in. Basically, you don't want to penetrate the shaft, although I do think that it probably would break this aluminum before it did that. And on this torsion spring shaft, I went to a friend who had a welder, and they welded this impact socket to the torsion spring shaft and did a great job and kept it nice and straight for me. So that would fit right into this 5/8 inch shaft. Now this I didn't know, I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for some other YouTubers who posted their garage lifts and the motor that they used. And this was a couple of guys used this particular motor, and then they said that you could just hook up a 5/8 shaft to it and cut off the end, which is what I did. And I showed you that earlier, so we don't have to get into that. This is the Pittsburgh electric hoist. And when I get up there, I will go ahead and secure it with these brackets. Basically, all I have to do is, once I get it up there, I'll set it on the headers that I have up there, and the headers will hold and distribute the weight, I think, best. I've kind of debated on which way to do it, and I think this is the best way to kind of distribute the weight and not put any extra weight on my actual rafters. So these plumb bobs I'm going to use to actually help me find the center points for this lift here, this platform portion. And so I've got to find that center point, and what I'm going to do is wrap a string around this drum so that it comes down this side here, and then I will use that plumb bob to come down and find the center point and do my adjustments. I'll be able to adjust it on the header, going back and forth across the width of the opening, and then I can move the drums back and forth for the length to find my spot, my center point, so that whenever this is pulled up, it pulls straight up to the middle. And that part, I really didn't get a lot of good explanation on that in any of the previous videos, and that's why I'm doing such an in-depth video on this, so that others can have an idea. One of the challenging parts about this also was lining up all of this so that it runs right into my motor. So I started with these bearing plates, and I secured two bearing plates and then ran my rod through there and into the shaft. But to do that, I had to I had to lift this off just slightly, as you can see here. I had to lift it using a piece of plywood, and then I bolted it from the back side. I had to buy some longer bolts and bolted it into this housing portion. This red portion has bolts on the inside, and so I had to bolt it to that. So I had to pre-drill and then do some countersinking so that I could get my bolt all the way through. And I could not find long bolts to get all the way through. I ended up having to buy, I think, 4.5-inch bolts, and then those bolts I had to countersink so that I could, and I used washers after I countersunk them to be able to get to this from the other side. So I'll just kind of show you how this winds up and how it works. We're going to take it up like it was being lifted. Get the idea how that's going to work, and then coming back on. So you notice that the cable itself is on the inside of the drum. So I've got to line up the cable with the top of my, that lines up and then pulls it directly in. So that's kind of my next puzzle to work with, is making sure everything lines up. And so I think I'll be able to do that using the adjustments that I can do across the header, going for the width, and then for the length, I can move my drums to match up. So once I get it up there, I'm going to use these plates to actually secure it to the header, and that should really be enough, because it's not going anywhere really once it gets attached to that header. It's very solid. Anything that I lift, I know that it's going to be able to handle. I did a little bit of overkill probably on that. These commercial parts are really rated pretty high for weight, and I have plenty of cable, so I'll end up having to cut the cable most likely. And the motor itself is the only thing I'm kind of a little bit worried about. We'll see how that goes, because I bought the smallest one that they had, which is rated at 400 pounds for 2 cables. I don't expect to ever lift over 400 pounds, but I want to see what it does from a deadlift, and we'll go from there. But they have different levels of these electric hoists, and the next one up I think goes up to 800 pounds. So bought that at Harbor Freight, and I think I covered that in the beginning. So that's this part. Now we're going to take this thing up top and get it into place. All right, so now I'm to the point of trying to line this thing up so that this comes straight up through this opening. And what I am doing is I'm using some string and I'm using these plumb bobs. As you can see down here, got a plumb bob on this side, and then I have a plumb bob on this side. And what I've done is I've marked basically where that hook on top of the platform should come up, and that's I only have an inch to play with on the length and the width. When I created this thing, I only allowed an extra inch, which means I have a ½ inch on each side to play with. So it's not a whole lot. As this thing comes up, the challenge I have right now is the fact that as it comes up, it's winding on this drum, this cable drum, and I don't know where the point is that it will stop winding when it gets to this, when it gets up to the top. So that's something I'm gonna have to play with. And I have made this to where I can adjust it. Right now, I've got the brackets attached to the beam, this beam up here, but I don't have it attached to the header. So I can move it back and forth. I can move it this way and then back that way if I need to. And then I can move these drums left to right to adjust for the width. But right now, as you can see, I'm off on this one by about an inch. I need to come in, and I'm off on the width as well. So I'm going to bring it back slightly. I'm going to bring it back this way slightly. So that right there lined it up pretty close. I might have a little bit more there, but, and this one's not too far off. It needs to go back slightly. So I'll go ahead and push this back slightly. Not much. About a ¼ inch right there. And still a little bit more. I'll go just slightly more. And you can see that's pretty close. In fact, that's almost right on. So this one over here, when I move that, so you just have to keep adjusting it until you get it to a good spot. Okay, I think that's pretty close. And just explaining this a little bit more, when I created this platform, I guess is what I will call it, I doubled up my 2x4s, and then I made sure I had a center 2x4 for extra support, and the header, and then I glued this plywood to this to stabilize it a little bit more. And then it just rests right on top, and with that L bracket, we'll attach it once everything is lined up and coming up correctly. And I think we're in pretty good shape. So next step is to go ahead and run my cables. I'll run my cables down to the platform, attach them, and we'll give it a test run. Thank you for joining me for the first of 2 episodes of the Garage Attic lift system that I installed here in my garage. I realized that after 50 minutes that I was going to need to split this up into 2, so the next video will be following directly behind this one. I am going to make sure that the materials list and all of the links for anything that I used in this project are in the description in both videos, so make sure you scroll down through that description if you're interested in those items. I am now affiliated with Amazon, so anything that you purchase will help this channel, and I appreciate that. I got some great projects coming up that I hope you'll stay tuned to my channel. Subscribe, like, and comment. That'll be helpful to me as I build this channel. Thanks once again. Have a great day.